Afternoon all. I thought I'd have another consultation game today. I've done the video today, so I thought, yep. Feeling a bit run down though from the two ones yesterday. I think two and I'm really knocked out. I did terribly in the war zone yesterday evening on Chesscube 15. So yeah, but these are great fun. I think these are great fun, these consultation matches. If you want to join in, just go to the Kingscrusher cafe at Chesscube, click on live games, find the game that I put in the topic. So Kingscrusher, team led by Benko Gambitier. So you'd find this game, you'd click here to go into the game, which I've already got a tab for, and you just chat with, and I've got ignore so I won't see your chat, but I can see the captain's chat. So I can speak to the captain. Okay, so I'm just emphasising I can see the captain's chat. I will take 15. Just negotiate time control. Okay, so by the way, if you haven't tried correspondence style chess, really, I guess I should do a Kingscrusher versus Rest of the World game on chessworld.net. I haven't got a Rest of the World game running at the moment. So maybe that would be good fun as well, if you want to discuss in great detail moves against me at, say, 5 days move, or even 7 days move. I think maybe 5 days is better a move, so that would be a slightly longer pace than these games. But yeah, if just in case that match happens, please do register at chessworld.net, and I'll let you know via a system message if there's a Kingscrusher versus Rest of World match. That would be great fun as well. Hopefully I don't have too many over the board games to lose too many rating points when I get completely exhausted by my online chess activities. So anyway, I played knight f6, so hypermodern movement is celebrated when you play knight f6. You're controlling the centre without committing any pawn moves, so pawns don't go backwards. So it's a great move against d4. Keeping flexibility of the position, keeping the option for either d5 or e6. In fact, I'll celebrate Nimzovich. I'm going to play e6. I'll put celebrate Nimzo. So, but the Queen's engine, of course, can be off-putting. So knight f3, but if knight c3, there's bishop b4. Done. So okay, we could go Bogo Indian. I think it's bishop b4 or something. Well, I could play c5, trying to invite d5. I'll play c5. No Bogo. So, d5, exciting. I think I'm going to take and maybe play the snake. Bishop d6, snake variation as a surprise. That'd be fun, wouldn't it? Probably not too great, but I think it'll be fun if I can get away with it, which I doubt. So, if bishop g5 later, this pin's going to be kind of annoying. I'm hoping for g3 from white. I think that will be less effective. Somehow intuitively, I played the fianchetto with g3 against bishop d6 and done incredibly badly. I'm not sure really totally of the underlying reasons for that as white. Anyway, I'm not sure it's needed for me to play h6, but a6 seems tempting here. And if e4, maybe I can just castle, because e5 I can take a rook e8, so maybe a6. Just to stop knight b5. And also, because the bishop was a bit of a liability there, maybe also b5 if a4 is not played. But that would be a bit cheeky here to play b5 without developing. And white has got the imminent threat of e4, e5. I think this move has been played a little bit. I think it's called the snake. I think it's funny actually, a lot of openings being sort of named after animals, you know, like the polar bear or lots of animal names for openings. I think there's a children's book on chess actually, animal names for openings. Yeah. So I mean, different animals have different characteristics, but some openings are based on wall formations, like Scheveningen, in the Sicilian Scheveningen, that little pawn centre. So you get openings based on things which have been observed in nature or in military, or even sometimes just from names of players, quite often though, isn't it? So okay, bishop g5. Now, okay, if I play castle. If I castle, then knight e4 might be dangerous. I can't have already misplayed this, can I? Because h6 takes knight e4. Have I already misplayed this? Because then that's kind of nasty, winning my bishop. There's a queen a5. If I castle knight e4, queen a5 check, then bishop d2. Maybe queen e7 here, because I've ruled out knight b5, so queen e7 stops knight e4. I'm not the most experienced player of this variation, as you can tell. But queen e7 might actually be playable, because later maybe, you know, bishop c7 and d6 and then knight d7. I'll try and get a grip on e5. Queen might be okay here. Alright, I'll go for queen e7. I think in bishop at f6 I can play g takes anyway. We need to extinguish that and build a sense of kingside attack. Clearly this move, queen e7, was full of dynamism and venom to be worried about. When in fact I just wanted to stop knight e4 here. There's a bit of e-file pressure. So in the Benoni, the bishop would of course be here, which is useful for this whole diagonal, of course. Now here the snake can go like this, like a snake can gang up on c3, can capture on c3, can weaken e4 as an option, because taking the knight would weaken e4, maybe also weaken d5. But then what happens with this bishop? Is it stuck still on c8? I've got to maybe play b5 at some point. Bishop c7, d6 would liberate that bishop. If I aim for d6, get the bishop on that diagonal. I think sometimes if you take on c3, also weakening white's control of b5, so maybe even bishop d7 to b5, hitting e2. Now this might explain why the fianchetto variation is less effective, because if bishop c3 is an option, then in effect bishop b5 is an option, and if the bishop's on this diagonal, then this diagonal is slightly weaker, which might explain why I tend to get really bad positions sometimes against the snake, playing bishop here rather than keeping it on this diagonal, because we have this idea that bishop c3 happens later, weakening b5. I'm just speculating really. as a generalisation. But if this snake bishop is going to take on c3, what are the implications of that? Weakens e4, weakens d5, potentially provides support for bishop b5s later if bishop d7 to b5. So yeah, I mean, I think opening names, the most common is like after the names of players, which is great to celebrate the past heroes in chess. And it seems, some players in the past in particular get loads of openings named after them. I think there might be some correlation with the number of chess quotes that they've made, like Tartakower has loads of chess quotes. He was a very witty guy, and also loads of openings named after him. So it's like the two went together somehow. So maybe if you want openings named after you, you just got to create loads of chess quotations. So anyway, Queen c2, and I guess knight e4, Queen e4. So can I move the snake bishop yet with bishop c7, or shall I just wait for e4? I could just wait here with castling, but then maybe bishop f6 and knight e4. So I could actually tuck this bishop away right now on c7 to avoid this knight e4 possibility. There's no immediate d6. Okay, I think I'm going to do that. I can't see, I hope rather, there isn't an immediate refutation on this like d6, because I'm not really a snake expert. I've just played on the white side and thought it was terrible sometimes, the mess I got into. But as I say, I was fianchettoing the bishop, and maybe that's the wrong approach. Now, does white actually want to waste the move playing a4 to clamp down on b5? That's another question. And also, does white really want to give me time to play d6 and support this knight with knight bd7? That would reduce the fear that bishop f6 can be destructive. And I've tried to reduce that fear with this move anyway. Oops, it's been played now. So c5 is the target, queen f6, knight e4. What about bishop a5 there? I guess there's knight d2, and then c5 is dropping. Is that really the case? It does look like to be the case. So I could just take an ugly pawn structure and hope for the g file. I'll do that, because I don't like the look of knight e4 on this c5. I think that would justify the idea of bishop f6. So sometimes you've got to just take an ugly pawn structure. Yes, there's an island as well, this isolated pawn by itself. This island here and this island here. So I guess I've got to play on my trump cards now. The dark square bishop, the g file, the e5 square control, maybe, so something like d6, knight d7 to e5 later, b5, bishop b7. But I think a4 is going to be played. That might weaken b4 then dark squares. So the bishop would be greater celebrated of a4, that weakening of the b4 square. But c5 looks like something I should support maybe with d6, and that avoids d6s from white. A double pawn's target. Are they actually exploitable double pawns though? I mean, it will take a long time to use the blockade square f5. I mean, okay, I was white against double pawns yesterday, and that was useful to use f5. But here, it takes a few moves. And if e3, that's pretty tame to play bishop d3. Rather than well, white's never going to be playing e4, e5 now, I guess, because of the f pawn. So I'm thinking, yeah, d6 and knight d7 would be good. d6 and knight d7. This e5 square. But do I want to replace? Say knight e5 happened. Oh, as I say, I think this diagonal is going to be an Achilles heel in principle. But in practice, I haven't actually played the black side of the snake that much. But I'm going to stop d6s now, I think, and protect c5. That seems a logical move. And then bishop a5 later to contest e4. Give me the option of bishop c3. I guess with the double pawns, the g-file's shielded with g3. So I'm trying to reduce the dynamism already. So it's more logical for that from that point of view. But what am I doing with this bishop now if it's not bishop a5? And in which case, okay, bishop a5 immediately, there's queen a4 check, winning the bishop. So I guess b5 should proceed, be the prelude to bishop a5 to avoid losing the bishop to queen a4. Do I need to also castle? It seems h7 is not going to be targeted with a battery here with the bishop on d3 now, that the bishop's over here. So the bishop's behind its own pawn here. So I've still got this plan then. I think b5, bishop a5. Okay. I suspect I may be losing this game actually. There's a big number of spectators. It's an opening I'm not really too familiar with. A bit too much improvisation I think here in the thinking process. And it also looks, oh, that looks not good. The queen's coming off. Would that necessarily be bad? I could aim for this plan anyway. Let's get the queens off, but get this bishop a5 move in. Could, I don't know, the e file be useful though here if the queens came off? I mean, it doesn't look as though it's that dangerous for me with the queens off. I wonder if this pawn also is kind of dislocated. If the queens came off, you can imagine bishop b7, the knight on b6, taking on c3 to slightly weaken white's control of a few squares. And if c4 is not possible, then e4 would be needed, and then I can use the e-file pressure to try and attack e4, and maybe even f5 as a temporary pawn sack to try and undermine the centre. So I guess I could be optimistic here, but every time I move bishop b7 though, knight h4 to f5 might be strong. Don't know if this is far too optimistic, so maybe the bishop actually should go on f5. So for knight h4, bishop g6, or should I just play, instead of committing the bishop to b7 then, given the strength it seems of knight h4, what about just knight d7 to b6 here? I'll try that first. Alright, I can play, I think I can safely play knight b6, I hope. Putting a little bit, oh, there's an immediate threat almost to bishop c3 and knight d5 anyway. So if knight h4 going to be played, because that simplifies my task of deciding this bishop, it can't really go to b7, can it? Because knight f5 check, I don't know, unless king d7, but then bishop h3, king c7. Is that possible to still gang up on d5? Maybe this is still possible, because if the bishop's over here on f5, it's hitting thin air actually. So I don't know, maybe allowing a knight to come to f5, the king on c7, but with the idea of bishop c3 and just winning this d5 pawn, maybe that's the way to go here. Or even, I don't know, if b3 is not played, knight c4 looks dangerous. Or is it just kicked? Maybe it's just kicked. But then knight e5, then I could undouble the pawns, maybe. It's getting a bit complex. B4. Well, actually, B4 is useful. To try and just undermine the pawn. Pardon me, yeah. B4, that's handy to think about as well. I hope that prompts white to waste a move. Okay, B4, okay. So the knight's not coming to F5 as easily now. And it's not using the standard anti-Benoni maneuver to C4, evidently, of course, because there's a pawn on B5. So I wonder just bishop B7 here, just to put further pressure now on D5. I could provoke E4. Or maybe just playing F5 first. I could play F5 first. And then maybe even King F6 at bishop H3. But if E4, that might be good to expose my king. Takes knight E4, F5. Starting to be confused actually now. I'm thinking maybe bishop B7 overall. Oh, knight B3 is almost trapping the bishop. I think I'm going to have to take on C3 anyway. Pretty soon. But then I don't want the rook to come in like this. Oh dear, knight B3, bishop B4. Wait for A3, then take. The rook's coming on the E file. So do I need this rook over here, this king over here, or where? I don't know where the king's going. In fact, I can extend the scope of this rook with H5, trying to provoke some weaknesses on the king side. Like, what am I doing with these rooks? What am I doing with this bishop? These are big questions. In fact, knight B3 might have the idea of knight A5 later, as well as getting the rook in like this. So I don't know, I can see myself going downhill here if the knight's coming to A5. Ah. Okay, I think extending the scope of this rook can't be too bad, I hope. Otherwise it's not doing much. I'm keeping the possibility of F5. Also restraining G4 might be handy as well. So maybe actually rook AG8 and then H4 to stop G4. Also knight B3, I don't know, there's also knight C4 defending that bishop. If knight takes, knight takes. Can this bishop be rerouted? Knight B3 looks as though it's positionally painful because of this idea of knight A5 later. Well, on the other hand, with the pawn on E4, this idea of rook C3 to E3 is not scary now because the pawn's shielding the king on the E file. So knight B3, bishop. Do I play bishop B4, bishop takes C3, or knight C4? I hate to do work on the position in terms of if-then, especially as we've recently had this discussion about if-thens, and I've tried to emphasise try and avoid that and think more creatively, but if-thens are essential in forcing situations to see the forcing variations first. So knight B3 is definitely like a forcing move, questioning what is the bishop doing here. So I would have to ask, myself, is it bishop B4 or is it bishop C3? What would be the strategic point of bishop C3 here anyway? Okay, H4 there's G4, and then I'm blocked up. Unless the dark squares here are useful, can I actually get this bishop back on this diagonal if G4 is played? Then there's F4. I could create that flexibility by playing knight D7 actually. Knight B3, just move the bishop back to D8. I think I like that to keep the tension actually. That will keep some time pressure on the opponents, I think. If knight B3, just to move the bishop back, and almost as if there's a positional plan, a cheeky one. Bishop C7 will keep guard of A5 anyway. So this is more flexibility now to answer knight B3. Bishop c7 also holds up e5, but it's already reinforced by several things. So f4, e5 doesn't look like a big threat at the moment. Maybe actually, I've just realised now with knight d7, c4, knight c5, the knight could come to d3. That would be a monster knight. Just playing c4 here. Somehow, did something just go wrong with white's position? Because c4 looks great with the idea of knight c5. And it seems I never considered that just a moment ago of playing c4. I think really I was more concerned about white's immediate threat of knight b3. But this changes the whole picture. If I can play c4, okay, it gives up the d4 square, moving that pawn, so maybe just knight f3 to d4, for example. But imagine c4, knight f3, then knight c5, knight d4. The knight could threaten to come into f5. Maybe bishop c8 to hold up knight f5 checks. And the knight's still threatening maybe knight d3. With the tactical then consequences of say knight b2 and decoying a rook and then bishop c3. So actually I don't know. Oh, this changes the picture a lot now. Because it's winning the c4 square. If I play b4, then my plan's gone. So how about c4 as a positional sack then? Takes. There's no knight b5 because of bishop d2 anyway. So I'm going to play c4 here. I don't want to give up the c4 square. I just want to use the c5 square and get a knight to d3. And if takes, so knight b5, bishop takes d2. So the bishop's justified staying on a5 here. In any case, kind of pinning this knight. It's an adventure. It's a totally dynamic adventure game, really. Every move seems to change quite radically the plans. Okay, so b3. Again, I don't know. b3. I mean, there's now b4. There's knight takes c4, I guess. Is there knight b6, I wonder? Or should I just take and then take on c3 and then play rook c8? Or should I just play rook c8 anyway? Maybe takes, maybe there's b4, pass pawn, and still I can use, I can stop white using c4 for a knight, so it'll be a nice positional sack and get a big knight on c5. I think I like that. I'll play rook c8 dynamically, just giving up a pawn here to get a huge knight on c5. I like that idea. Also, this diagonal's lit up. Bishop b6 is as well. In conjunction with, say, rook g3, that would be a big threat as well. So takes b4, stopping white using c4, but cheekily using c5 myself at the cost of a pawn. I think that's the way to go. I wonder if the team would factor this in, this idea of b4. It's a bit outrageous in its own right, is it? In fact, I benefit from having a pawn on a6 to stop knight b5s. Oh, now there's an emergent possibility of c3 here. Even c2 and even b4. Why is this being allowed? I'll play c3. Surely. Was that a last minute decision to do a knight retreat? Okay, getting d4, so I can play b4. Don't worry about knight f5s. And there's no time for bishop c8 or anything. Bishop b6, the c3 pawn drops off. So maybe I'm getting critical, because if knight f5 I'm losing d6. Oh, but on the other hand, I don't know, c2, is it worth playing c2 then? But then there's knight a3, attacking the pawn. If b4 there's knight c4. And that's going to play rook c4 and b3, that would be winning because two connected past pawns. So if c2 then knight d2 is forced, then I'm stopping knight d4, so I think I'm going to have to go for this line with this exchange sack. Although I've just realised I'm dropping the c pawn. Oh dear. It's a goner. I'm dropping the c pawn, aren't I? b4, there's not knight c4, there's knight takes c2. I've just blocked in the bishop. Panic stations. Uh-oh. Can I play knight e5 or bishop b4? I think knight e5, knight c2, knight d3. So if my pawn structure gets repaired, or I don't know, take and use this diagonal as previously mentioned. This diagonal might be a bit weakened, or even just, I don't know, knight c5 here. Knight c5 here. There's not actually threatens b3 and d3. I think knight c5 here. But then what if rook c2, maybe bishop b4, knight moves back, then I take on b3. I think hopefully they're going to be in time pressure because I've really messed up this position big time. I don't know what was going on. The plans were changing too quickly. It's just too dramatic. Every different move, these delicate configurations of which squares are weak, which squares are not. But knight f5 looks as though that's a logical one to aim for. I haven't got knight b3, have I? Takes. I've got bishop b4, bishop d2. It looks bad actually. This looks kind of grim. Whoa. This knight d3, rook c2, knight takes, bishop b6, hitting d4 and f2. Now I've seen a game just earlier today somewhere where f2 was a major issue. So I think I'll go for that. Basically f2. This reminds me there might be some sort of vague issue with f2 here. But this looks like a scrappy game now. I've lost control. But this knight's on the rim here. I don't know. Unless I want to play bishop b4 first. I could slip in bishop b4 first here. Yeah, I guess to force knight b1. I think I'm going to do that first. In fact, I might be able to win the c-file here. Oh, I've won the c-file. That wasn't much of a fight. Okay. So this move, I could put more pressure on d4. I'm playing h4. Try and weaken. And there's knight f5 check. No, there isn't. Over the hand, knight takes, pawn, rook c2. That's interesting. That gets a bit crazy. Do I want to keep the dark square bishop? That's another question. For it's f2 possibilities. I'm really confused now. Maybe taking to play a5 and then bishop a6. I think that looks attractive. I'll play that. Bishop's supported by the knight at the moment. Okay, I think bishop e6 now. So I've got this strong knight on d3, Kasparov knight, octopus knight on d3. I've only got 4 minutes left to their 9. Okay, so I'll pawn down as usual. Nothing new there, but I seem to have good control of the c-file. Good knight on d3. Dark square bishop potentially dangerous on f2. This bishop, as I previously mentioned right from the opening, this diagonal could be handy, but for completely different reasons. Just the bishop just happens to be not protecting that diagonal. But is there a rook infiltration? Maybe rook c4, bishop c5 would start to gang up on f2. That could be handy. Rook c4, bishop c5. Just trying to put the pressure on. Also that a pawn could be vulnerable. So rook c4, bishop c5. Knight c6 is going to trap my my rook in. Ouch. So I hope to be able to get my rook out before knight c6 happens. Okay, I can get my rook out. Cool. So do I want it, I think I want it on c4, and this is bishop f1. Do I want it on c3? Oops, just playing a legal move here. Hold on. Not too much time to consider. Rook c4, bishop f1 is a sitting target. So maybe rook c3. Just try and get the rook into the game. Maybe rook a3, attack a4. I want to keep the knight on d3 actually. So maybe rook c3 is good. Okay. I can just get the light square bishops exchanged and then go back maybe for the a pawn after. Although knight b5 is going to be a big knight on b5 now. But also I know bishop c5s and rook g3s could be handy here if the rook's on the third rank for rook g3. Little cheapo idea. Rook c2 here. I'm losing d6, not nearly. It's protected by the bishop. Nearly. Oh, I can't play knight c5 then. I can play bishop c5 and knight b4 hopefully, and then maybe knight b4 to d3, so I'll be on f2. So 1, 2, they'll all be on f2 potentially. I want to try and make sure this is vulnerable now in the time pressure situation. f2. So bishop c5, knight b4, knight d3. Can I stop the h pawn? Good question. I haven't thought about it. I just want to win the f pawn. Maybe winning the f pawn will help stopping the h pawn. Now these comments could all be bluff to me to distract my thinking, of course. So. Okay, I'm losing the h pawn. Okay, that's. I just want to play h4. I think I'll go for the f pawn straight away now. So rook f1, knight b4 to d3. Get some coordination of all these three guys. Except I'm losing f6 as well, bit of a shame. And now f2 is protected as well. This isn't going too hot. It's going to win a4 here, at least, or not. Try to. But is the team in time pressure? 6 minutes left. Finish me off here. If I can win a4, maybe the a pawn's a runner. I can get back from the b file to try and stop the h pawn. I think the general pattern so far is I'm getting chances from time pressure situations where the team hasn't got too long to coordinate voting or whatever, discussions. So how many pawns am I down? 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm only 3 pawns down. And this doesn't lose a rook, does it? I can safely take that to get past a pawn. I hope. And I can play rook b4, try and scramble back to stop the h pawn, try and get my own pawn running down the board. Mind you, there was also rook e4 there. Which is now not possible. But there is f5 here, because if it takes, there's rook g4. f5, that looks kind of interesting, because then knight h6 say takes an e3, and if knight e3, I don't know, just taking, and then maybe, no, I'm not sure. This pawn's a bit of a runner. It would give my king access to f7, so I think I might try it. Hopefully not losing anything major by playing this move. Though again, it's inviting knight e3 to f5 check. I want to use the king maybe to stop the h pawn, and use the rook to guard the b file and get the a pawn running. So I seem to have some counterplay. The dark square bishop is tying down white to f2 a little bit. This move would kick that protector anyway from f2, which is good news. And the other good news is the team's now in time critical situation, I think. But how many minutes have I got left? I've got only 2 minutes 14. I can get into the square with king f6. I hope. So h6, king f6. And then there's g4. Looks pretty dangerous. Okay, what about king f7 though? If g4, king g6. I can't see any major checks here. Don't want to use the rook just to stop a pawn. Oh, rook h1 though is happening. So what about rook b2 here to try and that's knight e4. And that bishop d4, there's knight e4. Okay, king g6 and king h7, and there's g4. Oh dear, there might be knight f4. Okay, I think I'll do this. Hope for the best. Try and get rook b2 to probe f2. So g4, g5, g6 is pretty dangerous. h7, then that would be winning pawn. I want to play like so knight e4 is always protecting f2 though. So if I move rook b2, there's always knight e4. Unless it's like bishop e3 and rook b2 with check is more dangerous. Where would the king move? King would move. I could win the rook and then win this pawn and use the a pawn. That seems like a good idea. Bishop e3. Except there's h7 here. I've just realised h7. Oh no, I'm going to have to sack the exchange. Nope, don't have to sack the exchange. I can take this pawn safely. Or there's knight f2. Check, just winning the rook. That's a disaster move, isn't it? I'm afraid it was time pressure. I think the team cracked in time pressure. 3 pawns up, but it looks as though the team's cracked up here. We've got a fast running a pawn. Can really exchange up. And when I see a comment like, sorry guys, that's kind of a clue that something's gone wrong here. Is there anything stronger than knight takes? What about knight g4? I don't think I need it. I think just simple. Although, I don't want to lose b6, so I'll protect that. I'll try and run with this pawn. Maybe I give up d6 for accelerating the pawn. I'm playing a4, just accelerate the pawn. So I've got a minute. I thought I was gonna okay, I'll stop recording now. Okay, comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.